rescue enacted by President Carter in 1979 to rescue the U.S. hostages at the U.S. Embassy in Tehran. The basics of this operation were relatively simple. The plan was to go into Iran, rescue the hostages, and come out with all pertinent assets intact. However, the ad hoc planning that took place with this operation hindered the success of this operation because there were a lot of different moving parts. Each different service wanted their piece of the pie. There was no unified command for all of the forces to operate under. So all of these went into the planning and limited communications to the failures of this operation. So starting out with some of the timeline and the timeline of events that happened with this operation. 6130s took off from Mazara Island, which was just off the southeast coast of Oman, and they were to fly into Iranian airspace and rendezvous at the Desert 1 landing zone in central Iran. Additionally, there were 8 RH-53 helicopters that were going to take off from the USS Nimitz, which was waiting in the Gulf of Oman just south of Iran. They would also fly to the Desert 1 landing zone where they would refuel with some of the C-130s that were there. It was MC-130s as well as EC-130s. The EC-130s were the refueling platform. However, they're typically not used as a refueling platform. They are traditionally used as C-2, so the capability was not the right capability for this type of mission. Additionally, the RH-53s were not air refuelable, so again, not the right asset chosen for this mission, for such a long mission into denied territory. So upon launching, the C-130 flight entered into Iran and were hit by 2 sandstorms, also known as haboos. They were not briefed that sandstorms were a possibility by Air Force weather, since this is a failure to communicate on the part of support for this mission. Additionally, there were one of the RH-53s was forced to fall out of the flight due to a maintenance issue and return to the USS Nimitz. Once inside the sandstorm, the C-130s could not radio back to the RH-53s to warn them of the sandstorms in the area. So because of weather and other issues with communication, both the flights arrived to Desert 1 late and behind schedule. Upon arrival to the Desert 1 landing zone, the Delta Force, approximately 160 Delta Force members that were on the C-130s, disembarked the aircraft and established security at the site and waited for the RH-53s. However, again, another failure to plan and failure to imagine if civilians were to come upon the site. A civilian bus drove through the area as well as a fuel truck. The fuel truck refused to stop and was shot with a 66mm round. So this definitely gave notice to everyone, the civilians who were eventually released, that there were Americans in Iranian denied territory. Additionally, once the RH-53s arrived at Desert 1, they refueled as planned, and then upon departure, because of the inclement weather, one of the RH-53s was in a hover and with a gust of wind was pushed into one of the C-130s, which both aircraft caught fire and 8 individuals were killed in that fire. In the confusion, all of the civilians were released and were able to go back to any government officials that they might know and give them information that there were Americans in Iran. Additionally, there was classified information in those aircraft, and it was not able to be disposed of correctly. If the mission had continued from here, they would have gone into Tehran, rendezvous with covert operatives, gone to the embassy, recovered the hostages, and then exfilled from Iran with the help of C-130s from Cairo as well as an Army Ranger team. mission did not happen because at Desert 1, the mission commander got approval for mission abort from President Carter. So just some things with emergency management and crisis communication. There was a failure to plan with incorrect aircraft chosen. Delta Force and Rangers did not train together, so there was a lack of planning and training before the mission execution. Additionally, the Marine pilots of the MC-130s did not have any training with any sort of night vision devices, so they were not used to flying at night, and especially for long times. Additionally, there was a failure to communicate, and I think this is the biggest one that influenced this operation, because there was issues with the chain of command. From the president to generals, it was relatively well established, but from the generals down to the other unit, there was a lot of different units reporting to multiple other units, and each of those units had their own requirements. So trying to fulfill all sorts of different requirements hindered the success of the operation. Additionally, with the weather issues, Air Force weather not briefing the possibility of sandstorms, and then not being able to communicate inside those sandstorms was definitely an issue for this mission. Also a failure to imagine with the possibility of civilians finding out about the mission going into well-populated areas is definitely a thing they needed to consider. And additionally, they did not destroy all of the classified information that could have been on those aircraft. So because of all of these failures, the Holloway Commission established 23 points. These are just a few of the points that the Holloway Commission came out with, and the solution to solving this problem was the establishment of U.S. Special Operations Command, also known as SOCOM. And the creation of SOCOM and the failure of this mission definitely played into the successes of the next mission, which is Operation Neptune Spear. And this is the operation to kill or capture Osama bin Laden. Going over the timeline for this, starting in August of 2010, the U.S. intelligence community were able to find a link between Osama bin Laden and his courier, and they collected all sorts of pertinent intel to take to the CIA director and eventually to President Obama. And that meeting happened between Director Panetta and President Obama in December of 2010. In the following 2 months, from January to February, the CIA presents 4 different courses of action that a special operations unit could undertake to either kill or capture Osama bin Laden. In the following month of March, the decision was made to go with the helicopter assault option. Following that meeting, training and mission rehearsals were conducted in North Carolina, Nevada, and then eventually in Afghanistan, where the team was launched from, and they were going to use SEAL Team 6 to do this. By the end of April, on the 28th, the National Security Council and President Obama had taken a vote considering all of the different options, the capabilities of the SEAL team, all of the different risks, the amount of intel that they had, how long the intel was good for, all sorts of things like that. And on the 28th, they gave the go-ahead for mission approval. On May 1st is when the operation actually began. The aircraft, all pertinent aircraft, including rescue assets, ISR assets, strike assets, and then these stealth helicopters going into Pakistani airspace to take the team in to bin Laden's compound. They departed. It was about a 30-minute flight from Jalalabad airfield into Abbottabad. All of the strike ISR and recovery assets were located in the eastern part of Nangarhar province in Afghanistan. Upon infill into Abbottabad at bin Laden's compound, one of the helos was struck by an RPG. However, it did not overly affect the mission. All of the U.S. persons on board were safe and were able to continue on with the mission. Upon infilling into the compound, there was a firefight that ensued that resulted in 3 people being killed, including Osama bin Laden, and 1 being wounded. After this firefight ended, Osama bin Laden's body was collected, as well as all pertinent intelligence, and then the helicopter that was down was blown in place. However, when the helicopter landed, part of it was on the inside of the compound and the tail section was on the outside. And this was because during training, the compounds that they had constructed as training compounds the walls were made with barbed wire, but in the case of the actual compound, they were concrete walls. So this was one of the mission failures of this, one of the few. Just little training isms that needed to be solidified to make it as realistic as possible. That did not happen in terms of this. So this mission, in great contrast to Operation Eagle Claw, they did utilize the emergency management and crisis communication principles. This mission was comprehensive, collaborative, progressive, risk-driven, flexible, and professional. They took all of the intelligence needed, they took the time that they needed to train, to conduct rehearsals, to make sure that this mission was as successful as possible, and they also had all sorts of backup assets if anything were to go wrong, other than what did go wrong, to make sure that this mission was successful, and if it was not successful, that they got all of their people back in one piece. So this mission was in great contrast to Operation Eagle Claw. Eagle Claw demonstrated the failures and all of the things that went wrong because they did not use emergency management and crisis communication principles, whereas they learned from all of those principles by creating SOCOM, having everybody linked under one chain of command, and doing all of the training together, having their communication down to a fine art with all of this, which made Operation Neptune Spear a great success compared to